Hey everybody, I wanted to share this with you. I stepped away from making any larger videos, any videos of involvement with what happened to AMC. I apologize for the background noise. I wanted to share this with you because this man, Micheal A.M.E., I don't know his last name. I know he puts it out there and he's not really afraid to go say things on the internet and present himself, which is great. It's a breath of fresh air. This is his X profile. If you're on X, I mean, it's a haven for, you get good and bad information, but it's a haven largely for people that hide behind the internet and they really don't show their face, but they say all these brave things and they do literally nothing outside of that, just kind of like the echo chamber thing. But there are the few bright spots. Like Micheal does some really good deep research. He knows a lot of people. He has a large following, and he's been gracious enough to talk to me, to chat with me about stuff, taking time out of his day to answer me, and I really appreciate it. I believe he was an investor in BBBY and GameStop. So it took a while to get connected to him because you have to sift through all the garbage on X before you actually find genuine people. So I'm really grateful to him. If you have a chance and you're on X, sometimes I want to say God forbid if you're on X, but if you are, check out his page. He has a lot of good, useful information. I'm going to show you a video he put up yesterday. He gave me permission to upload it to this channel. I'm going to link his channel in the description, link his profile, whatever I can find. He's just been a great guy, a great help to me, and he has a lot of good stuff that he puts out there. Aton knows him too, so there's kind of a connection there as well. And I wanted to give a shout out to Aton for continuing to go on what he's doing and trying to get some sort of clarity and possibly a lawsuit in the future for the AMC investors. I wanted to also thank Sam out there. Sam, thank you for everything. I talked to you and Aton, and I know there's been some strife between you, and I hope in the future we can all work together for something better for the investors that were involved with Project Popcorn. Anyway, you guys, I'm going to show you the video. If you have a chance, check out Micheal's page. Like I said, he has a lot of great stuff. He has a YouTube channel, and I'll put that in the description. Thank you, and I hope everyone's doing well.
We're going to untangle this massive, highly controversial web of allegations from our source material. And I'm telling you, this red string connects the absolute highest levels of global finance, the Chinese military, and, wait for it, meme stocks. Yeah, we're talking about your local AMC movie theater, along with stocks like GME, BBBQ, and MMTLP. The author lays out some explosive claims here about hidden financial mechanics, geopolitical maneuvering, and how everyday retail investors got caught in the crossfire. So let's just jump right in and break down exactly what this source text is arguing. Okay, let's dive into this. At first glance, you're probably thinking, how on earth do elite Washington law firms, obscure Belarusian cryptocurrency exchanges, and the place you go to buy overpriced popcorn to watch a blockbuster have anything to do with each other? Well, the source material argues they aren't just loosely connected. It claims they are fundamentally, literally integrated parts of a massive, coordinated financial operation. To make sense of all this, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the global legal network. Second, the tokenized stock pathway. Third, China's AMC theater acquisition. And finally, number 4, real estate, liquidation, and political cover. All right, starting with section 1, the global legal network. The author actually gives us this wild tier list categorizing elite law firms based on what they call their geopolitical friction levels. The text specifically calls out firms like Sidley Austin, noting they formally registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act for working with a Chinese surveillance tech company. But it goes further. The author explicitly labels this tier a treason list. They're alleging that major firms like Sidley Austin and Paul Weiss are acting as foreign agents, while at the exact same time producing high-level U.S. government officials, like those we saw in the Obama administration. The source even draws these dark shadow network connections to figures like Jeffrey Epstein. It's a heavy accusation about deep ties at the highest levels of power. Now, look at how the author maps out this revolving door between government regulators and private consultants. The text highlights a guy named Haoxiang Zhu. He goes straight from being the director of the Division of Trading and Markets at the SEC over to becoming a senior advisor at Oliver Wyman. And why does that matter? Well, the source pulls up the corporate history of Marcia McLennan, Oliver Wyman's parent company, and points out their involvement in a massive 2004 bid rigging scandal, which the author actually links to the 2008 financial collapse. So the narrative being built here is this deliberate pipeline right from SEC regulators and MIT academics straight into corporate consulting firms with a very controversial track record. So you might be asking yourself, okay, powerful people know powerful people. Regulators go work for consultants. That's not exactly new. But how do these high-level legal ties actually connect down to the retail stock market? How does this affect the companies you and I might invest in? Well, that brings us to Section 2, the tokenized stock pathway. To really grasp the author's core thesis here, we have to understand what a tokenized share is. According to the source, these are synthetic derivatives that track the price of an underlying stock, specifically targeting stocks like AMC, GME, BBBQ, and MMTLP. These tokens allow for 24/7 trading and they settle in crypto, which means they operate completely outside the traditional regulated brokerage system. And here's the kicker. The source claims this isn't just some cool tech innovation. They argue it's a deliberate loophole. The allegation is that these tokens became the main way the black market laundered money because bad actors could infinitely short these American stocks, knowing full well that shorted, counterfeit shares in the crypto space don't have to be reported to traditional financial authorities. Let's move to the timeline, because the author sequences this out very specifically. They claim the groundwork was laid back in 2018 by Oliver Wyman, setting up a crypto pathway with China that the author ties back to Jeffrey Epstein's network. Then, in 2019, this system officially goes live via an exchange based in Belarus. Fast forward to early 2021, and these tokenized shares, which used to be restricted just to institutions, are suddenly pushed out to the wider public through massive crypto exchanges like FTX and Binance. And the author gets very specific here, pointing directly to platforms like Zengi.com, which used to be called Currency.com. It's a Belarusian exchange. It launched publicly in May 2019 as the world's first regulated tokenized securities exchange. The author alleges that synthetic derivatives of American companies were deliberately routed through this exact platform to completely bypass U.S. oversight. But wait, it goes higher than Belarus. The author links this whole operation straight back to massive global banking institutions. By looking at trade finance blockchain consortia, the source specifically highlights the involvement of the Bank of China. The overarching narrative here is that these tokenized shares were primarily used to launder black market money for China, moving billions in unregulated synthetic trades while entirely flying under the radar of the American financial system. Which leads us to Section 3, China's AMC theater acquisition. The source lays out a very clear decade-long timeline for who actually owned AMC. Back in 2012, the Chinese conglomerate Wanda Group just bought AMC outright. The very next year, in 2013, Wanda takes the company public in an IPO, but they keep a massive majority stake. They held on to that controlling interest for years, right up until May 2021, when Wanda abruptly dumped its remaining shares on the open market, right smack in the middle of the meme stock frenzy. Now, the author finds this ownership deeply alarming, and they focus heavily on Wanda Group's founder, Wang Jianlin. He actually served in the People's Liberation Army for 17 years before becoming a billionaire businessman. The source frames this as a literal national security issue. In fact, they boldly allege that the AMC IPO and the subsequent mafia bust-out was, from beginning to end, a Chinese military operation against the United States. They're essentially asking, how did a staple of American culture fall under such direct foreign military-linked control? So if you're following the author's logic here, a huge question pops up. If this is such an obvious, foreign-directed operation actively damaging U.S. companies, how does it maintain control without any political interference? Why didn't regulators step in? That brings us to our final part, Section 4, Real Estate, Liquidation, and Political Cover. To explain this, the source points to recent political scandals as proof of domestic cover. They specifically highlight Linda Sun, the former deputy chief of staff to New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Sun was arrested in September 2024 and charged with acting as an undisclosed foreign agent for China. And to really escalate this point, the source notes that the White House Twitter account actually accused Kathy Hochul of being a criminal. The author argues that a public statement like that from the White House would be straight up defamation unless the government literally already had the receipts and had legally proved it behind the scenes. So the text uses this alleged political infiltration as the exact reason these massive financial operations went completely unchecked. And the mechanical endgame of all this? The source calls it a deliberate mafia bust-out scheme. By tracking the history of EPR properties and these interconnected board members tied to groups like Apollo Global Management, the author claims they essentially liquidated AMC's physical real estate properties for pennies on the dollar. Then they leased those exact same properties back to AMC at these inflated, crippling rates. It was designed to deliberately drain the business of its cash from the inside out, which brings us to the ultimate exit strategy. And honestly, this is the grim conclusion of the author's whole narrative. The goal wasn't just to bankrupt a movie theater chain. The goal was to use everyday retail shareholders as the liquidity needed to cash out. Just look at the aftermath. Following that massive vertical spike during the trading frenzy, AMC experienced a devastating prolonged crash. The author presents this drop not as some natural market correction, but as the calculated result of a company being deliberately drained. Through short selling, toxic real estate deals, and executive extraction, the public retail investors were left holding an empty bag. So the crucial point is really captured in the author's own words. They write, they set it up to be able to infinitely short stocks, then bait in retail shareholders to be exit liquidity. That summarizes the entire explosive allegation right there. The source is arguing this was never just about a struggling theater chain. It was a highly sophisticated, hostile financial operation spanning from Chinese military officers to Belarusian crypto exchanges to elite American law firms, all working to exploit loopholes and drain American wealth. The source material makes some incredibly bold claims that absolutely demand we look much closer at the opaque systems running our markets. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking questions.